There was a flurry of denials today after the release of that shocking report into VBS Bank called the Great Bank Heist. An advocate who penned the report, Motau, detailed how an estimated 2 billion rand was looted from the bank and of course recommending that more than 50 people be charged. VBS received deposits, remember, from municipalities, but it seems only after officials were bribed. Motau finds that the bank was also looted by the chairman and those close to him, and ultimately it was liquidated and could not pay depositors, many of them ordinary people on the street. The list of those implicated is long. It includes KPMG as well as the brother of EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu, Brian Shivambu. Brian Shivambu has denied he received anything from the bank, but the Daily Maverick reporting that sources claim he funneled 10 million rand through his company to his brother Floyd. To discuss, we're joined by the Deputy Editor of the Financial Mail, Sikonathi Mantshantsha. Great to have you with us, Sikonathi.
Thank you very much.
Could the biggest casualty here be the EFF? How big is this for them?
Look, it's too early to say, of course, but if any of those allegations, either about Floyd Shivambu directly and his brother, or even the alleged 1.3 million rand that also found its way to the EFF, then we really have something big. But people who have been observing the politics of this country over the past 10 years will not be shocked, of course, by those allegations.
Well, let's start with Brian Shivambu. So he's the brother. He's denied that he even received money from VBS. He said he had a contract with Vele, which was another company linked to the chair of VBS. But it's a bit complicated, but presumably he could show some documentation about his consulting work for Vele, if pushed.
Let's hope he will. Now he'll have to start here. That was last year in 2017, according to his own statement. And he received 30 million rands from one client.
He must be very good at his job.
He's 16 million rand. He must be brilliant at his job. He's 30 years old. He graduated in 2017 from the Tshwane University of Technology's South Campus. A year into the job market, he's got a 16 million rand contract from just one client, which then happens, now this complicates things a bit for him. Vele owned shares in VBS. Why did VBS pay? According to Motau, at least, the payments came from VBS, not from Vele, the shareholder, which owned 26% of the bank. Why did the bank pay him and not his client? That is just 1 year. Let's repeat this. He graduated from TUT.
He was working at the EFF behind a computer, as I understand, before.
And then a year later, he's such a brilliant guy. In just 1 year, from one client, he says there's mining services and things. He got 16 million rand from one client. And of course, he's a generous brother. Gives, according to the sources of Daily Maverick at least, gives 10 million rands to his brother and another 1.3 million rands to the EFF. So let's see how he explains that. I presumably he's got a contract and he's got invoices to Vele.
For millions every time, yeah.
For millions. This is at a rate of more than 1 million rand a month.
Yeah.
Now, he then must also tell the authorities how it comes that the bank pays and not the client.
What do you make of the EFF's Dalian Mpofu raising that verse, "I'm not my brother's keeper"? And yes, as journalists we have to say, you know, just because one family member is looks like seemingly corrupt, the other isn't. But the point is here, Floyd Shivambu may have knowingly received corrupt proceeds.
To look at Dalim Mpofu's "I'm not my brother's keeper," you'd have to go back to biblical times. There's a gentleman who killed his brother, and God asks, where is your brother Abel?
He was guilty in the first place. Where
is your brother Abel? The Bible tells us, it says, am I his keeper? You go that far back to understand it. Now let's extend Dalim Mpofu's logic to its logical conclusion. Nhlanhla Nene and Siyabonga Nene, Tutuzani Zuma and Jacob Zuma, I'm not his brother's keeper, so I should not know what my family gets up to. if they are not EFF, until they are EFF members. If it's Siyabonga, we have to know, how did his father not know?
Yeah.
How did Tutuzane's father, Jacob Zuma, not know what the son was getting up to?
And they've been singing in Parliament,
Yes.
father of Duduzane.
Ubabaga Tutuzane, Ubabaga Siyabonga. Now we've got Ubabaga Uputiga Floyd Shivambu, and we should not get involved.
Yeah.
This is a family affair. And the unfortunate part as well there, that includes the parents of the siblings as well, when it comes to the Brian Shivambu matter. They are directors of the company, or at some point were directors of the company that had contracts with Vele.
What's the motive here? So the report finds that Brian Shivambu received this money gratuitously for basically doing nothing. But what could Floyd Shivambu have opened doors to municipalities? What's the end
Now,
game?
I'm not going to speculate. What we do know is what Terry Motau found after scrutinizing all the evidence before him, including all the documents of the bank and the major investor. They didn't find that contract that Brian Shivambu seems to have, that only Brian Shivambu seems to have. And of course, Brian puts it, says, I was never contacted. So Terry Motau, or whoever takes this forward now, will deal with that aspect. He will, presumably Brian will produce the contract and take it from there. Did Floyd Shivambu know, or did he not know? He has not commented about the alleged 10 million rand. That's one, and this is now about 24 hours later. I can assure you, unless he's a very rich man, if someone dropped 50,000 rands in my bank account today, I will know. 10 million rands is a different matter altogether.
Yeah.
So Floyd has to also answer whether or not did he receive the 10 million rand.
Okay, so the political ramifications will play out. Certainly we haven't seen that contract from Brian Shivambu. He could have just released it today and put the matter.
Well, not in the statement that he released, but then he can release that to investigators who are now interested. Because the regulator now has to go after everybody that's been identified. The directors of the bank have been sequestrated as a start, so that's the first step, and the company Vele Investments. All those, the 900 million rands that they received, it's now the curator of the bank is trying to recover those assets by sequestrating everybody involved there. The next step, these people that have now been identified, the first step would be, of course, for the curator again to try and recover as much of the assets as possible. And that's when they will go and say, Mr. Shivambu, did you say you have a contract? Can we see it and show us what value you produced for this client of yours to pay you with VBS's money, and they take it from there. That's when matters of sequestration come in, and the criminal procedure follows thereafter. So there are two different things: to recover the assets, and then a criminal charge if there's enough evidence.
Which will take a while, but we have names, so we have something to work with. KPMG, I mean, were you surprised that somebody else mentioned again?
No, not at all. I mean, remember, KPMG, the two auditors there, Mr. Malaba, I'm forgetting the other gentleman's name, they were released or fired from KPMG for this in the provisional application that went to the High Court, which sought the liquidation of the directors of VBS. They were mentioned, and amounts were mentioned, about 7 million rands each. Now we know that they received about 30 million rand each, according to Terry Motau. Am I surprised? Not at all. The banks don't sign their own accounts. There's an auditor that must put that respectable stamp of authority coming from KPMG. If someone, a senior partner like that, can do it, you're on your way. You can create all your accounts as you please. Because
then it's so hard to uncover corruption. I mean, do you think the Reserve Bank was sleeping on the job here, as claimed? The
fact of the matter is that VBS executive directors and employees were running the operation. The Reserve Bank sits there and looks at information, at statistics that is sent to them by the bank. Now, when the bank manufactures that, it's only when someone inside the organization speaks out and points out what's going on, that you then investigate and see what really has been going on. You bring in forensic investigators. That's not what the Reserve Bank is there to do. That's not what any regulator is there to do. People are in positions of trust, trusted by poor people with their small deposits. When they go there and decide deliberately to be criminals, the Reserve Bank is not there to see that. The auditors and indeed the officials in the bank, that's their job to make sure there's no criminality in their operations.
The head of the JSE has said the same thing on the show. If people are going to make up financial statements, it's very difficult, especially if those financial statements are signed off. All right, so many people are implicated. We did reach out to the EFF, by the way. They didn't want to come in. We've spoken about KPMG. We've got this list here. Somebody is not here. Dan Matjila from the PIC, and the PIC is outraged that he was mentioned. Somebody said, that 5 million rand was earmarked for him, but they're not really sure if he got it or not. But Terry Motau surely had to mention that. We're just left in the dark a little bit.
Terry Motau interviewed the people, and Mr. Poppy Mukotubane said, I was instructed by the chairman Shivabu to go withdraw in cash 5 million rand and fly it in a helicopter to Johannesburg. And when I asked him what the money was for, he said it's for Dr. Den. Now, Dr. Den is indeed Daniel Matjila. Everybody knows that. That's what Chifiwa Matodzi told Mukotubane, according to Terry Motau. Whether or not that was indeed true is something else. But we do know that there were 2 directors on that board representing the PIC, and this is Nisane, a gentleman by the name of Paul Nisane, and there's I think his name is Makam, the head of risk at the PIC. They were there to represent the PIC's interests, and the PIC was 25% shareholder in the bank. They worked all these years. They had been directors since the PIC took over the vendor pension fund. They were placed there, but now when Matodzi says he needs 5 million rands cash, he says he's going to give it to their boss. Obviously, Motau did not interview Daniel Matjila or put this allegation to him. We'll have to see what happens. But we do know, according to Terry Motau at least, that there's 30 million rands that these 7 million rand each that these 2 guys who represented the PIC received, and they admitted that they received these monies paid into their nominees, into their nominated accounts.
So Dan Matjila is denying categorically, but this certainly raises more questions around there. All right, let's move to something else that you're watching closely, because I do want to talk about it. Malusi Gigaba, speaking before Parliament, he's adamant that he never did favours for the Guptas. Let's listen now to one of these late night addresses. This was 2 nights ago before Parliament's Home Affairs Portfolio Committee. Let's take a listen.
It was a professional relationship. As a public representative, it's inherent, as I indicate, in my role to interact with as many stakeholders as possible, to be accessible and hear their perspectives. And as I say, it doesn't stand to reason that I'm beholden to them because I've interacted with them in a space where there are many other people. I've been to their home where I was invited to functions in the presence of many other public representatives and private individuals, and therefore there is no evidence of a corrupt relationship in that regard.
All right, and I want to play a second bite before I chat to you, Sikonathi, where he's denying that he wanted to give a line of Gupta's South African passport, South African citizenship. Here he's saying he's not really involved in the naturalization issue. Let's listen.
I have never communicated with Mr. Chawla. I have never seen or been made aware of any other naturalization applications for the Guptas except for Mr. Ajay Gupta and family that I approved as per recommendation and made mention of in my submission above. Outer must provide proof of the said email and prove that I approved the said naturalizations and that I signed the certificates. I deny this with the contempt it deserves.
All right, so this is very confusing. He says that there's a narrative that he was involved in the naturalization of the Guptas, and there certainly has been for a very long time. Is that all the fault of the media and outer, or Minister Malusi Gigaba himself?
The very fact that we even have to be discussing Malusi Gigaba in itself is ridiculous. This is a man who has no qualms, at least lying to a judge under oath.
That's been found,
and has been found to have lied to a judge under oath. Of course, he's appealing that, but let's again look at the man in context. He becomes public enterprises minister. The Guptas take over Transnet. They take over South African Airways. They take over Eskom. He goes to become Home Affairs Minister. The Guptas get their way. Is he still worth any of our time? Should he be sitting there in that position in the first place, pretending to represent the people of South Africa?
Well, is it a pity to you that there's not enough evidence? I mean, Outer wants now phone records, right? Because he says, I didn't interact with the Guptas that much. If only Thuli Madonsela had produced those when she was bringing up phone records of Brian Molefe and others. I mean, there's hence allegations, insinuations. Is there enough evidence here?
There's a difference between there being no evidence and there being nobody looking for the evidence. That's what we have here. In this country, we have for the past 9 years had no law enforcement agencies. Had we had any, Malusi Gigaba would not be sitting there as a member of parliament. And many of his comrades, and indeed many in the private sector. Let's raise that. If we had any law enforcement agencies, we would not be having the discussions we are having now about VBS Mutual Bank. We would not be having the Steinhoff. We would not be having the Escoms. So to say there's no evidence is a blue lie. Nobody is looking for the evidence. Journalists who have had this evidence for the past 4 or 5 years, and it has delivered us to where we are right now. How come the law enforcement agencies, they don't find it when they are looking? Where are they searching? If I, who has no power, no authority to get any evidence anyway, I get it anyway.
All right, well, we're waiting for a new head of the MPA. We're watching the Hawks, so hopefully we'll chat to you in the future. Thank you very much. No love lost there for Minister Malusi Gigaba. That was Sikonathi Mantshantsha, Deputy Editor of the Financial Mail.